US President Donald Trump has said he would, quote, absolutely consider bombing Iran again if Tehran resumes enriching uranium to a high level. Posting to Truth Social, Trump also said Iran has to get back into the world order flow or things will only get worse for them. And he then goes on to say they are always so angry, hostile and unhappy, and look at what it has gotten them. That truth came just hours before Iran began holding a state funeral to mourn top military commanders and nuclear scientists killed during the conflict with Israel. The coffins of the dead are moving through crowds of thousands of mourners in central Tehran. And one of those that is following that is Ali Akbar Deraini, a researcher at the Center for Strategic Studies, joining us live now from Tehran. Let's start with these funerals. It seems a stark reminder, I would imagine, of how the last couple of weeks have unfolded. You're in Tehran. Could you give us a sense of where Iranians are at now that they've had a few days free of these attacks and with these scenes of these mass funerals?
The funeral in Tehran today is a clear demonstration that national solidarity has been strengthened. Never in the past couple of decades I have seen such sense of national unity and solidarity. It reminds me of the national unity Iranians had during the Iran-Iraq war when dictator Saddam Hussein invaded Iran. So this is exactly the opposite of what the Americans and the Israelis had anticipated. They had four goals by launching this war of aggression. First was to decapitate and disrupt Iran's command and control system. Second was to destroy Iran's nuclear program. Three was destroy Iran's missile program. And four was to create chaos and provoke dissatisfied Iranians to take to the streets against the ruling system and topple the establishment. All four goals have failed to achieve, and now we see Iranians supporting their country in the face of an unprovoked war of aggression, and Iranians are now in a much better situation. So all four goals have failed, and they expected that they will destroy Iran's nuclear program. Iran's nuclear program has suffered, but it has not been destroyed. Iran was very quickly able to respond to the Israeli aggression. The main reason why this ceasefire went into effect is because Iran inflicted unbearable pain on Israel. Otherwise, Israel would have never stopped that aggression.
And if we look at Trump, what he's been saying, he said that he would hold a meeting with Iran next week. Iran has denied this. I just want to read out a statement for you first before I ask you the next question, because that statement is by the Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi that says if President Trump is genuine about wanting a deal, he should put aside the disrespectful and unacceptable tone towards Iran's supreme leader, Grand Ayatollah Khamenei, and stop hurting his millions of heartfelt followers. Looking at the language there in that tweet, he's concerned about, it seems, the language that's being used by Donald Trump. Why is that?
Relationships are built on time and trust.
Why is that?
warmonger Trump has fallen in the trap set by Netanyahu, and now he has increasingly employed very disrespectful and threatening language. Look at what he said last week when he threatened 10 million Iranians in the capital, Tehran, to leave the city. That provoked Iranians' wrath. It angered the Iranians, and the reason there is such a sense of national solidarity today is exactly because of Trump's threatening and disrespectful language. Iranians don't buy coercion, and it appears that war-hungry Trump is addicted to the language of threats and coercion. This has backfired. Iran does not give in to coercion, and it's only going to make things worse. But now look at what has happened to Iran's nuclear
has denied reports that he is considering giving $30 billion towards a deal with Iran.
demands. This is Trump's goal. Netanyahu's goal has been to destroy Iran's nuclear program, to provoke riots inside Iran, to
Looking back at these latest pictures where we're seeing those funerals that are being held of chief commanders in the leadership, also civilians, there's a lot of support. Can you give us an idea once again of the sentiment, the Iranian sentiment, not just in Tehran, but across the country while they see those pictures live on their TV?
Iranians love their country, no matter their political affiliations. Many of those who are opposed to the ruling system have risen up, have stood against foreign aggression. So it reignited that sense of patriotism and nationalism in Iran, even though, exclude all Iranian opposition groups, whether inside or outside the country, have rallied around the national flag and now stand behind their leaders to stand up to this war of aggression. There is a ceasefire now, but absolutely no trust in the Israelis. I will not be surprised if the Israelis are going to attack Iran again as soon as they replenish their arsenal, as soon as they become ready for another war of aggression. But Iran is also making itself prepared for defense. So Iranians now feel that they're a country with 7,000 years of civilization is under attack, and they have to stand up to foreign aggression, no matter their political affiliations.
And it's interesting you mentioned civilization for years there, because that's exactly what the rhetoric by Trump and Netanyahu has been. It's this idea of civilized versus uncivilized. Ms. Ali Akbar Daraini, thank you very much for your time from Tehran there.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and
experience a new cheesy masterpiece, the Mighty Cruncher Melt, for only 14 dirhams, because chicken is our thing.
just have gathered in Thailand's capital.
Right, well, let's speak to Chris Doyle, Director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding and a commentator on Middle East affairs, joining us live now from London. Mr. Chris Doyle, thank you for your time. So Tariq's report there highlighting the mass killings at GHF sites. So what do you think is the real motive here behind the establishment of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, especially considering the reporting we're seeing in the Israeli media about soldiers ordering to fire on civilians who pose absolutely no threat?
Well, it is an abomination, an utter disgrace, an inversion of all the global humanitarian principles about independence and impartiality, neutrality. And the reason it was set up is simply because Israel was under pressure, given its 11-week-old blockade of the Gaza Strip. 1.23 million Palestinians were denied food, water, medication, all forms of humanitarian aid. So in order to get round that and not allow the UN humanitarian agencies in, the associated agencies, they created these militarized, securitized hubs, 4 of them. There used to be 400 distribution centers in Gaza, and there came death traps. As we've seen, around about 550 Palestinians have been killed in trying to get food there, to travel by foot, long journeys, and then the families worry whether they'll ever come back again. This should never, ever have been allowed to have been set up or established when there is a proper effect.
Oh, really? Why?
Effective aid mechanism at the ready, at the borders with the UN agencies and others. So this really is a continuation of that blockade. It is a way of trying still to put huge pressure on Palestinian civilians, using starvation as a policy of war, because in those parcels, the boxes that they pick up, there's no water and there's no fuel. And the food, the number of meals, is not sufficient to feed the population of the Gaza Strip. The elderly, the infirm, those who've been injured can't get there. So, unfortunately, it's another example of where Israel enjoys complete and utter impunity from any of the norms of war, of international law. And this has to be dismantled now. And the proper systems of delivery and distribution of aid set back up.
And Mr. Doyle, no ceasefire now for the longest time. Complete stalemate with Netanyahu clearly prolonging this war despite protests, not just abroad, but also domestically. And now we have a Trump speculating that there could be a ceasefire in Gaza within a week even. And also an Israeli newspaper has reported that the deal could expand the Abraham Accords with regional countries, including Syria. Now, the question is, what's changed, if at all, and do you see Netanyahu agreeing to a ceasefire in the first place?
I think we have a long way to go, sadly, until we get to a ceasefire. Many hurdles to jump over. And this, I think, is coming from the Trump administration trying to build on what they see as the success with Iran, the way in which, the president got that ceasefire after Israel's aggression. So they have it inverted. They're doing it the once. So they have it inverted. They're doing it the wrong way around. There needs pressure on Israel to stop the military operations, to go back to the ceasefire deal that was agreed, in fact, back in January, and to get to, yes, the release of hostages, but also Palestinian detainees, but as a matter of urgency to allow the United Nations to do its proper work. If you do not put pressure on Israel, we will not get a proper ceasefire that means that Palestinians' lives can somehow start returning to dignity and decency, and they can try to recover from this genocide. Moreover, there's got to be accountability at the end of all of this, and nobody's talking about that. A proper investigation and accountability for those who committed war crimes and crimes against humanity. And once again, the White House is never going to be talking about that. And that's one reason why Israel will continue to escalate on every front, the continued bombings of Lebanon and Syria. It's a very mixed picture.
And speaking of a lack of accountability, we're certainly seeing this with Israel's occupation in the West Bank. It's worsening. Can you clarify the connection between what's taking place in Gaza with the expansion of land grabbing in occupied West Bank and, of course, East Jerusalem as well, restriction of movement, and these constant settler attacks that do go unpunished and, if anything, encouraged?
Netanyahu wants to escalate on every front. In many ways, people have speculated that one of the reasons that he ordered the attacks on Iran was to divert and deflect attention from the horrors of what was going on in Gaza. And I think the fear is, now that Iran and Israel are pulled into a ceasefire, maybe there'll be talks with Iran, that actually the Israeli attention will go to escalate in the West Bank even further. And you're going to see even more violent settler attacks on Palestinian villages. You're going to see even more demolitions. They've been going on apace, even more land grabs. And of course, Israeli military operations have been going apace in the northern part of the West Bank, particularly in refugee camps. Well, those operations can certainly be expanded. And this is all a part also of Netanyahu wanting to hold on to power, to keep that coalition together. He can right-wing extremists tied into his coalition. If he makes progress in their eyes in the West Bank in giving them more control and ending any possibility, of course, of a Palestinian state. Because, of course, before the whole Iran conflict, there was going to be an international conference where many major powers may well have recognized an independent state of Palestine. So this fits absolutely within Netanyahu's strategy, his long-term vision. He wants the West Bank to eventually be annexed formally to Israel. Effectively, it already is. And to put an end to all the Palestinian nationalist dreams. Now, the question is, does he get away with it? Well, based on what we have seen in the last 20 months, he's got every reason to believe he can.
Exactly. Thank you very much, Mr. Chris Doyle, Director of the Council for Arab-British Understanding and a commentator on Middle East affairs.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.
Right. Well, hundreds of protesters have gathered in Thailand's capital in Bangkok, demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Paetongtarn Shinawatra. Anger has been building over her handling of a border dispute with Cambodia. Thai nationalists accuse her of selling out the country after a phone call she had with former Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen was leaked. During their conversation, Shinawatra called the former Cambodian leader uncle and members of the Thai military opponents. Tony Cheng is live for us in the Thai capital, Bangkok. Tony, can you explain who the protesters are that we're seeing coming out today? In large numbers, it seems.
Very large numbers, and I think we had to revise that number of hundreds up to thousands. Between, I'd say, about 4,000 and 5,000 here at Victory Monument down in central Bangkok. The mood has slightly dampened in the last 15 minutes with a heavy downpour, but nobody seems to be going away. Lots of colourful umbrellas up. I think part of the reason for that is because a lot of people have travelled from out of town to be here. We were out there about 20 minutes ago speaking to people. They'd come from the deep south, from the provinces on the western border, from central Thailand. And I think that's because there is really a very genuine feeling here that they want the Prime Minister out. People we spoke to said that she hadn't represented the country very well, particularly in this conflict with Cambodia, but also more generally, they say they don't like the policies of her party, Partai. I think underlying this is another problem. The average age here is well over 60. And what we're really seeing is unhappiness with Thaksin Shinawatra, her father, the man who's been so divisive in Thailand for more than 2 decades. He's now back. Many people feel he's the puppet. He's pulling the strings of his daughter, the puppet, who's in front. Yeah, this is really unhappiness, frankly, which is being expressed in him.
Yeah, and a wealthy and powerful family, as you just mentioned there. But is the Prime Minister's position really under threat, do you think?
12 days of war, pitting the U.S.-Israeli axis against Iran. President Trump is painting himself as a statesman.
It's in your DNA and in your blood to cheer against Trump.
He and his administration are taking on any media that don't buy that line. The killing fields in Gaza, disguised as aid stations. The videos are horrific. And dismantling the headlines. Somebody's got to do it, and nobody's better at it than us, all right. From holding talks with Iran about its nuclear program to bombing its nuclear facilities, to then executing a trademark Trumpian 180-degree turn and brokering a ceasefire. From publicly backing Israel to then scolding it on live television with a little profanity thrown in. The American president had another one of those weeks that had political leaders and news organizations struggling to figure out what to make of it all. There is usually a theatrical component to what comes out of the White House these days, starting with a president obsessed with optics. Donald Trump's persistent pivoting has less to do with diplomacy than it does with the narrative, one that he hopes casts him as a peacemaker. Despite all the twists and turns, Israel's actions in Iran have been insufficiently questioned, just like in Gaza, while Western news outlets continue to paint Iran as an irrational existential threat to the Middle East. It is a misleading framing with elements of propaganda to it, which when one compares the nuclear programs in Iran and Israel, simply collapses.
Welcome back to Morning Joe.
Of all the sound bites Donald Trump has provided American journalists with over the years, this one may end up in a category of its own because of what Trump said and the way he said it.
We basically have two countries that have been fighting so long and so hard that they don't know what the they're doing.
Trump was criticizing both Israel and Iran. It's obvious he really doesn't like it when people don't listen to him. That's what I picked up on, Trump's frustration. And of course, there was the swear word itself.
They don't know what the they're doing. Do you understand that?
Trump's whole persona is based on deal making. The book that helped propel him into stardom was The Art of the Deal. On his reality shows, it was all about the theater of deal making. So now it's the theater of diplomacy. So it's important to him that he gets credit for what he does, that the media give him credit. That's what really matters to him.
This is a very weird situation we all find ourselves in, because on the one hand, you have America funding the wars, supplying the bombs, and then the president wants to come out of all of this looking like some sort of hero.
Make no mistake, however, this is a war Israel instigated through airstrikes coordinated with the U.S., which then bombed Iranian nuclear facilities just for good measure. Iran's military response was measured, targeting a U.S. Air Force base in Qatar after warning Washington the attack was coming, resulting in no American casualties. Part of Benjamin Netanyahu's strategy in attacking Iran was diversionary, to draw attention away from Israel's genocidal assault on Gaza, the horrific scenes of starving Palestinians continually getting mowed down, killed, while lining up for food aid. A second element in Israel's thinking is to cripple Iran economically, as well as militarily, by killing more than a dozen of its top military figures. The goal, to mitigate Iran's influence in the Middle East through regime change. What made President Trump's criticism of Israel's ceasefire violation so extraordinary, though, despite the performative aspect of what he said, was that Trump was still calling out an ally.
I'm not happy with Israel. You don't go out in the first hour and just drop everything you have on them. So I'm not happy with them. I'm not happy with Iran either.
Certainly, part of it is political theater. And he's the master of theatrics, to create ambiguity about what he wants to do, so that he can have various options. As things change, he can go back and say, I told you so. So when there is a chance for the overthrow of the Islamic Republic, he talks about regime change. Or if the situation is different, he can say, I wanted to make Iran great again. It is a combination of political theatrics and strategic ambiguity, which is a very effective way of pursuing policy.
So Trump himself has moved across the scene from possibly wanting to negotiate with Iran to then saying he needs to wipe out their nuclear program to now wanting a ceasefire. Is this a sign of instability, or is it a factor of the way he approaches his governance? I think we see both. In some ways, he did more than any other U.S. president in supporting the Israeli prime minister, but at the same time, he also did more in tamping him down.
If the U.S. was out to destroy Iran's major nuclear sites, all of which are buried underground and heavily fortified, this appears to be a case of mission unaccomplished. The Americans targeted 3 sites, Fordo, Natanz, and Isfahan, using some of the biggest bombs in existence, GBU-57s, bunker busters, which weigh more than 30,000 pounds. President Trump's declaration that those sites had been obliterated was quickly contradicted by U.S. news organizations.
Even though President Trump did describe the strikes on the 3 sites as having been, quote, completely and totally obliterated, really it's a question of how accurate that is.
And Trump did not take it well.
CNN is scum.
Benjamin Netanyahu has played the Iran nuclear card before, long ago and repeatedly, first raising the imminence of the threat to Israel 30 years ago. Another angle that is underplayed in Western reporting, Iran's nuclear program is no secret. Its development has been monitored by the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, which has time and time again concluded the Iranians have no nuclear weapons. The IAEA is a UN body that keeps an eye on all signatory nuclear powers, but has very limited oversight on one of them, Israel. The Israelis have had nuclear weapons for decades, but refuse to acknowledge that. And the Americans are happy to tolerate that while treating Iran as some kind of rogue nuclear threat, a danger to the Middle East.
The narrative has been that they have been developing a bomb specifically against Israel. And certainly Iran did develop a bomb program up until 2003, but it was never directed at Israel. It was directed at Iraq, and it came to an end when the coalition forces moved into Iraq for the Second Iraq War.
Iran and the U.S. have been engaged in a Cold War for almost half a century. Every American official, Democrat or Republican, they all think Iran is a principal source of instability and chaos in the region.
We're very clear. A nuclear-armed Iran is an existential threat to every country.
And the same way that the Iranian media portrays America in the most negative way, American media portrays Iran in the most negative way, as a threat to stability in the Middle East.
Iran has been the largest state sponsor of international terrorism for all of our adult lives since 1979.
And this kind of hostility leads us to the point where somebody can go on the BBC and say that the Fordo nuclear facility is only meant to kill Jews.
This is a nuclear capability that is built specifically and totally for the murder of Jews in Israel.
That statement has no basis in reality, but it goes unquestioned. In fact, Iran has behaved in a pretty pragmatic way through this crisis. When America dropped the bunker busters on Fordo, the Iranian retaliation on American bases in Qatar was pretty carefully calibrated. It only sent as many missiles as America sent bombs. The intention there was to ensure that the region wasn't set alight. The idea that Iran is the most crazed actor in the Middle East is not the truth.
Iran is everyone's favorite boogeyman. Even when the United States' own intelligence says there is no nuclear bomb being developed, it's dismissed. And America's always had a few designated external threats, and one of them has always been the Islamic Republic of Iran. Listen, Iran didn't do itself any favors by behaving the way it does. However, the American government really needs to take a hard look at itself in the way that it is regurgitating Israel's narrative on Iran. Again, if anyone needs reminding, Israel was the aggressor in this.
In a story rife with misconceptions, here is yet another. Although Donald Trump has backed off on the need for regime change in Tehran, both the U.S. and Israeli governments have pushed for it, and Benjamin Netanyahu continues to do so. The past few years have featured periodic episodes of unrest in Iran over social, political, and pocketbook issues, caused at least in part by the brutal economic sanctions its people have suffered under for so long. Given that context, there has been plenty of speculation on Western news outlets that the joint military assault could bring down the leaders of the Islamic Republic. Instead, we've seen something else on the streets there, signs of national unity.
Another myth has been that the minute that the regime began to be attacked, that the Iranian people would rise up and overthrow the mullahs. We do not necessarily assume that when there's a Black Lives Matter demonstration in the United States, that it is in order to overthrow the government and the entire system. But foreign states consider it such a hostile state, they immediately jump to the conclusion that the people want to overthrow it. And in fact, it's a regime that governs over 90 million people, and a great number of those people support it.
In Iran, there is a clear sense this is not over. All of Trump's talk about making Iran great again, and Netanyahu trying to instigate a national uprising using old political slogans like freedom. There is an understanding that Israel is laying down tracks on which a train of a future war with Iran can be run at any time. There is no assurance that this is a permanent peace.
At a time when the situation in Gaza is as dark and dire as it's ever been, the amount of media attention this genocide is getting has been falling off, despite the fact that there have been developments, including aid stations that have proven to be deadly. Nick Muirhead is here with more.
The biggest story, the biggest scandal in Gaza continues to be the operations of the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation. Over the last 2 weeks, which coincides with Israel and the US's war on Iran, at least 169 Palestinians trying to get food from GHF distribution points have been killed, and Palestinians have documented what that looks like. The sites are exposed, there's no shade from the summer heat, there's no crowd control or guarantee of safe passage, which has led to UN officials calling them death traps. The GHF has kept its funding a secret for the most part, but what we do know is that the US government supports the organization. It has authorized $30 million in funding, and according to Reuters, the figure could increase to hundreds of millions of dollars. In a recent press briefing, State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said 44 million meals have been distributed by GHF so far.
We are committed to endorsing, helping, and promoting efforts to make a difference.
Meanwhile, doctors in Gaza are sounding the alarm. They're running out of baby formula. Some newborns have been given less than 36 hours to live.
Nearly 2 years now, the Western media's coverage of Israel's war on Gaza has proven indefensible in headline after headline, time and time again. Much of that criticism has come from journalists, academics, media watchdogs, but few voices can cut through as effectively as Asal Rad's. Her viral headline corrections, posted frequently on X, have exposed the contradictions and the double standards in mainstream reporting and offered viewers a crash course in how language can shape public perception of war. If you've been watching the Listening Post, you have seen her here before. Now, with the dust barely settled from Israel's 12-day war with Iran, a conflict that produced a familiar pattern of media coverage, we turn to her again. As a historian of the Middle East, Asal Rad's analysis of how that war was thwarted and how it connects to the ongoing genocide in Gaza, and unlike many of the headlines that she takes apart, informative.
I've said it before and I'll say it again. Headlines are very often the only part of a news piece that gets read. That's why I focus on them. People are short on time, articles can be paywalled, a social media snapshot of a headline is easier to consume than 800 words of detail. So it's important to get headlines right. And in the nearly 2 years of this genocide in Gaza, there have been so many headlines that have been so wrong. And then Israel started its war with Iran.
Moments ago, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, a targeted military operation to roll back the Iranian threat to Israel's very survival.
Netanyahu had already set the tone for how the story would get reported. And then the floodgates opened on the typical headlines we see whenever Iran is involved. There was an additional element this time because Israel was deeply involved as well. The language used by news outlets has been so revealing. Israel's strikes were characterized exactly as Israel described it. They were called preemptive. Anything by Iran was an escalation rather than a retaliation. Service announcement. But if Iran said something, it was a threat. Then there's the Israeli government versus the Iranian regime. Even though Netanyahu has spent 17 years in office and has shredded due process in Israel. Of course, there are big problems with the Iranian state. Headlines and news reporting should reflect that by all means. But don't whitewash that create these limitations, not individual journalists. Of course, there might be some problematic journalists, but most of the time there are power structures and editorial red lines imposed on how stories are reported. So that's what we're seeing reflected in these headlines. It's an institutional bias, an establishment perspective, and the victor's version of history as it happens. I'm not the only person correcting this stuff, but it's an indication of how many people want their media to get it right that people refer headlines to me to look at, or increasingly they call out the headline writers and say, we can't have this be the record of this moment. You need to correct this.
And finally, there was a news story that just came out of New York City that caught our eye since it bucked some dominant news narratives, like the ones we've already examined this week.
It always seems impossible until it is
Thank you,
done.
Leonie. Zohran Mamdani is now one step closer to becoming the city's first Muslim mayor.
Thank you, Ayan, for coming.
Mamdani has roots in
I'm so sad
India
for the
and
news.
Africa. His victory in the Democratic primary this past week shocked anyone familiar with the politics of a city that has the largest Jewish population outside of Israel. An unapologetic supporter of the Palestinian cause, Mamdani has said that should he become mayor and should Benjamin Netanyahu ever set foot in New York, he would order the police to arrest Netanyahu, who has an ICC warrant out in his name. Mamdani's victory over Andrew Cuomo, the former state governor who was funded by billionaire donors like Michael Bloomberg and Bill Ackman, has had pro-Zionists on the U.S. airwaves freaking out.
Far more frightening and far more stark than his progressive policies and plans with no backup, his lack of experience, etc., is his blatant and rife anti-Semitism. Yes, it's horrific to be.
Mamdani still has the election to win later this year, but in a city dominated by Democrats, that's looking like a formality, particularly after this week's primary result, which suggests that despite the dominant political and media narratives out there, some voters are still capable of thinking for themselves.
Ay, naku, Lord.
Welcome to Times by Danube, our latest project at Silicon Oasis.
All right, Marwan Bishara is Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. He joins us now live from London. Marwan, let me first get your take on Trump's latest comments that there could be a ceasefire in Gaza within a week. Does this seem like a real possibility to you?
Hi, I'm Yusuf. Thank you for coming.
There's a real possibility there will be a ceasefire, whether it's a week or two, remains to be seen, because clearly the Palestinians are not party to this news.
Jonathan.
There seems to be an Israeli advisor of Netanyahu, Dremer, who's in charge of the negotiations, but he's not in Doha, he's in Washington, or going to Washington. So in a sense, you could say that the Americans and the Israelis are discussing the conditions of the ceasefire, not the Palestinians and the Arabs, the Egyptians, Qataris, and so on. Which means they want to come to an understanding between Netanyahu and Trump about the way forward. Which also means that, to my mind, it's not so much that Trump is putting pressure on Netanyahu to have a ceasefire, which is, I mean, it could be framed that way. But it's also could be framed in a way that he's helping him climb down the tree. Just like he helped him climb down the tree in his war against Iran. Because really, there are no more targets to hit in Gaza. There were no more targets to hit in Gaza probably in the end of October 23. But be that as it may, there are no targets to hit today. All what we're seeing today is one massacre after another. That's why it really does not merit the name ceasefire. Because this is not war. And there are no two parties fighting. Trump is helping Netanyahu stop the criminality, the genocide, the war crimes, and the starving of the people in Gaza.
Marwan, you mentioned that Trump was helping Netanyahu climb down the tree, also in relation to what happened in Iran. And I want to pick up that thread with you. Do you think that Prime Minister Netanyahu is feeling any pressure to be more conciliatory to the idea of a ceasefire because perhaps he's feeling pressure that he owes Donald Trump for the U.S. striking those 3 nuclear facilities in Iran?
Look, it's clear that whatever Trump is going to ask of him, he's going to do. Because unlike Biden, who's been the masochist in chief, this president, Trump, is the sadist in chief. So when it comes to the relationship, he probably wants to get his way. And if he feels after Congo and Rwanda that he wants to do something in Palestine, a ceasefire, as the EU or whoever else like to call it, then I think it will happen. Again, the question is under what condition? Is it a long pause? What is it? What's the nature of it? If they are still thinking about to link in, according to the Biden original plan, linking a ceasefire to a more regional initiative that involves Arab state normalizing relations with Israel, then this would be something that Netanyahu is very interested in, because this is Netanyahu's own agenda. He wants a ceasefire that allows for the release of more captives, leading to a normalization of relations, leading to early elections. That's his agenda, because he still thinks he merits to be prime minister again, maybe what is it, sixth time or something, despite all his failures, indictments, war criminality, and what have you.
Marwan, I just want to talk to you for a moment about this Haaretz report that we mentioned a few minutes ago, because this Haaretz report, it backs up the reporting that Al Jazeera journalists in Gaza have been telling us since the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, started its operations. But it's still quite chilling to see this all laid out in black and white, no?
Absolutely. I mean, never have I seen a cliche being or drawn in blood and tears, as I see the cliche of might versus right taking hold in Gaza again and again and again in the most evil of ways, because you know, we and our colleagues and you know, our viewers, we all lived it. We didn't just watch Gaza, we lived Gaza for 2 years now. We lived the war on hospitals, we lived the war on children, we lived the war on civilians, the war on nurses and engineers and students and what have you, the war on journalists. But it was never like this. Why? Because there's something about the entire thing accumulating in those scenes of starving people after 2 years of mourning, of losing their loved ones, of losing their homes, their houses, their jobs, their schools, the meaning of life. For them just to end up being starving and being shot at and being humiliated. There's a certain level of evilness in this that I personally haven't watched ever. They are not simply carrying war crimes. They are not simply in violation of laws of war or of international law, as a lot of people like to repeat. Decency and humanity is dying every day in Gaza because of the evil of the most moral army in the world, the least moral army in the world.
All right, that's Marwan Bashara, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst. Thanks so much for joining us, Marwan. It's always great to get your perspective.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like, share, stay ahead.
We do a lot of wellness activities here. There's a lot of good schools, top schools, including some of the British schools. One of the best.
Thousands have gathered at a square in Iran's capital, Tehran, for a state funeral for nearly 60 people killed during Israeli attacks. The ceremony is commemorating slain nuclear scientists, military commanders, and civilians. Similar processions will take place across the country. Senior Iranian officials are calling it a historic day for Iran and the revolution. Rasul Sardar is joining us live from the capital, Tehran. Rasul, just take us through what's expected to take place today at these funerals.
Why?
Well, Imran, today is going to be a remarkable day for Iran. Perhaps this is the largest state funeral after Iran-Iraq war that was ended in '88. So we're simply talking about 60 people, but in total, we know that there has been hundreds of people killed by Israeli strikes. So now we're talking about the leaders, the military leaders, the civilian leaders. We're talking about the scholars, the nuclear scientists, and also women and children. So
message me after my live.
One certain image
because
here
I cannot see your
absolutely
message when I finish the
absolutely
live.
highly emotional for many Iranians. One specific truck is carrying children's coffins here. So this has historical references when it comes to the country's political theology. Just the third Imam, according to the Shia political theology, Hussein's son also has been killed in Karbala, and that has been an essential issue for the Shia political theology. So the coffins of the babies is such a historical issue in Iran, and now they're also displaying the children who have been killed by Israeli attacks to the whole public. We're seeing that there are thousands and thousands of people attending this. So each of these public displays are also showing Iranian system here, try to show internally and also globally that which kind of support it has among the Iranians. So that's also the attendance to this funeral, attendance of the people is also another essential issue. So just when we see particularly the military leaders, we are talking about the chief of staff being killed, the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards, Hussein Salami, being killed, or Hajizadeh, he was the commander of the aerospace there. And we're talking about the intelligence leaders. We're talking about the leaders of the paramilitary groups here. So, and also talking about at least 11 nuclear scientists here. Just remember, in the opening attacks of Israel, 15 of them have been killed, and in the following 11 days, we have seen more and more. In total, we are talking about, just as military leaders, more than 30 top military leaders have been assassinated, and nuclear scientists as well. We have seen Israel have been bombing the residential areas, educational institutions, universities, the health facilities, the hospitals, the residential areas, the military headquarters, intelligence headquarters as well. So now Iranians, as there is now a kind of ceasefire and still holding, they have postponed the state funerals, but today now they are holding these funerals.
Rasul, just stay with us for a second. Iran says that the US has to change its tone while speaking of the Iranian supreme leader if an agreement is to be struck on Tehran's nuclear program. In a post on X, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi says if President Trump is genuine about wanting a deal, he should put aside the disrespectful and unacceptable tone towards Iran's supreme leader, Grand Ayatollah Khamenei, and stop hurting his millions of heartfelt followers. That's going to be a problem moving forward and it is a big if there are going to be peace talks between, direct talks between the US and Iran.
Indeed, Imran, I think this was the most expected statement or reaction from Iran's foreign minister. Anyone who knows Iran will know how the supreme leader has a central role in this whole structure. There is a common misunderstanding about Ali Khamenei's position. Many people regard him as a religious leader, but according to the constitution, he's not only the religious leader, he's the political leader, he's the military leader as well. He is simply the head of state in Iran. And also according to the constitution, his position is not only political or being a top of a hierarchy, he has a divine role as well. According to the Shia political theology, he's the representative of the 12th Imam, and he's holding that post, so he has divine rights as well. And not only for Iran, across the globe, we know that there are a significant number of Shias that seek for his guidance. So he's a political leader, military leader, financial leader, head of state, but he's also a leader of a faith as well. And anyone who knows that will be extremely careful, meticulously careful of not coming out and publicly criticizing him, particularly accusing him of lying. Once you do that, you're simply dynamiting the ground. But as you also stressed, here the key word is if. President Donald Trump is genuine about wanting a deal. So that if is extremely important because we understand that now Araghchi is not closing the doors for the potential negotiations. So he's putting a condition here. And then the critical issue is when Donald Trump criticized Ali Khamenei, accusing him of lying so publicly, he's simply attacking the person who is eventually going to give the green light to renegotiate with USA, or simply not allowing the state to negotiate. So that's why this is an extremely critical issue. And we have seen throughout that 12 days war, Ali Khamenei was the central figure here. And as long as he stands up, people here believe that state is going to be up and running. So that's why the whole system was simply centralized around him and making sure that he is safe. And still, we do not know about his whereabouts, because many Iranians believe that the risk of assassinating him is still not over.
Rasul Sardar there, live for us from Tehran.
Don't miss out. Get the full picture. Subscribe to Al Jazeera for reliable news and expert insights. Like,
Guys, that's the sad news again. I think we're going out now. Okay, guys. Guys, bye for now. Thank you for coming, everyone. Thank you, Mentor. Thank you, Marquinitos. Thank you, Ian. Guys, I need to end my live now. It's been an hour. Thank you. See you later.